Well, per capita, Australia is now in a recession. But the government still wants to spend and employ more public servants than the number of Aussies being employed in the private sector. Craig Kelly, the government seems to be on a parallel economic universe here.
They are, Chris. We saw the data last week from the Australian Bureau of Statistics that shows we've now had 6 quarters in a row of negative GDP growth. That is the first time since records have been kept in our nation's history that we've had 6 quarters of a row where the individual slice of the pie has been shrinking. Now, this is simply because of the disastrous policies of Albanese, Bowen and Chalmers. We are completely on the wrong track, Chris. Now, and it's not just GDP per capita, we're going backwards. The other things that are not Canada, the length of hospital queues. People are also experiencing lengthening queues to get into public hospitals.
Yeah. And
what does the government do to try and cover up this mess of falling GDP per capita? They import 1 million people over the last 2 years, which again gives it a double whammy for people living like in places like in Western Sydney that can no longer, we've got a generation now because of that high rates of migration forcing up housing prices, that can no longer afford to own their own home. It is a disaster whichever way you look.
Yeah, not surprisingly, Katherine, as the AFR highlighted, Australia has the worst level of disposable income in the world. We are masking this recession, aren't we?
We absolutely are. I mean, to see the decreasing discretionary spending for households, I mean, we all know we're in a recession. Everybody out in the suburbs, everybody who's got a mortgage is struggling. And then when we look to our government and the way they're solving this is through government spending. I mean, what does that mean? Taxpayer money being spent. We can see, how frivolously they're spending it with things like the NDIS or, a rugby league team over in Papua New Guinea. And as Craig rightly pointed out, we are going backwards. These are the weakest figures in 3 decades. And, we're looking at businesses who employ people, business owners who use it to put a roof over their family's head and food on the table. Their earnings are down, their revenue's down, their profit is down. And the government is just covering it all up. And at the end of the day, there is going to be a bill delivered to the Australian people, and it will be our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren who are going to have to pay the tab for this mismanagement of the economy. I mean, this is all an artificial bubble, as Craig pointed out, shoving 1 million people into the country to prop up the figures. But these people need services. They need roads and schools and hospitals. So, when these people come in, exactly how much are they contributing to the economy once we factor in all the expenditure for them and their families? I mean, this whole thing is just a house of cards waiting to tumble, and I'm really concerned.
Yeah, if we'd applied any scrutiny whatsoever onto the 1 million who came in over that period, there wouldn't have been 1 million come in. Now, I was following both of your posts over the weekend. Craig Kelly, how have we got to the stage where our Vegemite, of all things, is more expensive at home than it is abroad?
Very good question, Chris. The Vegemite made in Australia, shipped all the way across the other side of the world to the UK in what is an expensive market in its own. You can actually buy Vegemite cheaper in places like Tesco and the UK supermarkets than I could at my Woolworths up the road, based on about a per 100 kilogram price. It was something like about 38%, 35% dearer here in Sydney than it was over in the UK. It's just a clear indication about how we have so many of the settings wrong in this country, how Australian consumers are being ripped off everywhere that we look, from our taxation system to the price we pay for groceries. Our government is leading us up the garden path everywhere you look.
Yeah, you're not wrong, and Vegemite a prime example. Now, I'm trying to follow this, Katherine Deves. Come with me and try and help us all. The latest census had a whole raft of questions related to sex in it. Anthony Albanese got very cranky and put a stop to it in a cabinet meeting. But now they've done a kind of second backflip by ensuring it is in the 2026 census. Here was Treasurer Jim Chalmers chasing the trans vote.
There will be a new topic in the census which covers sexual orientation and gender for the first time in 2026. We have listened to the LGBTIQ plus community to make sure that we can work with the ABS to deliver this really important change. when it comes to the 2026 census. We say to Australians from the LGBTIQ plus community, you matter, you've been heard, you will be counted.
Katherine Deeves, more backflips than we saw on Paris, and of course they're listening to the trans community very loudly, aren't they?
Well, they're weak. I mean, they at first stood up and said, no, we're not going to do this. And look, to be fair, maybe we should know the numbers of LGBTIQ plus people, but let's not forget about a little case a couple of weeks ago, Tickle versus Giggle, where it says that anyone with a gender identity, a man with a female or woman identity, he is a woman. He is a woman, and now they want to be counted separately, so they want to have their cake and eat it too. And if we're going to be counting gender identities, I mean, what? We're going to be keeping records on subjective, internal, fluid, made-up identities. So one moment he could be a man, and then she's a woman, and then maybe they're non-binary. So this is going to be corrupted, ridiculous data because there's no set definition, and you can change your identity, whenever you feel like it. But, I mean, it would be good to know exactly how many sort of middle-aged cross-dressing men who are identifying as women who are responsible for destroying women's rights in Australia. So, I'm not completely averse to it. But, again, we're in a cost of living crisis. How much is this costing the Australian taxpayer, all this backflip and rewriting and all these meetings and all these bureaucrats? Like, it's just an absolute nonsense. I don't even know what to say. The Labor, I mean, they're so pathetic. They're always backflipping on everything. So, and we also know that LGBTIQ hold a lot of power within government institutions, even though they're always crying about how victimised they are. And, the argument that they're finally being counted, it's like, what? Just because you're gay or lesbian, you were never included in the census before? I mean, it's just the whole thing's a nonsense.
Correct, a nonsense. And so from now on, from 2026, Craig Kelly, we will not know factually how many biological males there are in the country and how many biological females.
Well, Chris, I sort of a little bit with Katherine on this one. I actually think it's not going to hurt to find out actually how many transgendered people there are in this country, because I think it's a lot less than the political voices that they are carrying. Like, we've got whole departments, whole policies being run to appease the transgender movement, from allowing men with penises into girls' bathrooms. Now, I'd really like to know what the percentage of the transgender population is of Australia. So I think actually, I'm looking forward to seeing what these numbers are. And maybe then when we do see how actually small numbers they are, the government won't give them the weight of influence that they have on political discussion and policy at the moment.
Great point. You were also posting on X, Katherine, about the latest trans policy coming from Surf Life Saving Australia. What direction are they going?
Look, this policy was put out a little while ago, Chris, but the reason I'm really angry about it, why I'm absolutely sick to death of these rainbow activists, is that my daughters are engaging in not just nippers but high-level training for surf life-saving carnivals. Now, they compete in categories that are male and female. They train mixed sex, but it's based on gender identity. And I went and looked at their policy, and there's hundreds of thousands of families signing up for the summer nipper program. And I mean, the policy is saying it's all on the basis of gender identity, and none of us are allowed to talk about it. We're not allowed to speculate. Apparently, we're not allowed to gossip about it. We have to acknowledge everyone's gender identity, and they've even gone so far, and I actually think this is not legal advice, but they've gone so far as to say that it is illegal to stop a transgender person from using the bathroom that they want to use. Now, I'm not familiar with any law that says that, and so are we now being told, or potentially even lied to, I suggest the organisation goes and gets some proper advice on this, that it is, if we say no to a man coming into our change rooms with our little girls into the ladies' toilets, it's illegal for us to say no to him. Is this what Surf Life Saving is actually saying to parents? I mean, it's an absolute outrage, and I'm sick of it.
Outrage is the perfect description for it. Craig Kelly, the Climate Change Authority, now run by former New South Wales Liberal Treasurer Matt Keane, wants us all to eat less red meat. Straight out of the pages of the UN and the WEF.
Well, people like Matt Green actually seriously believe that if we eat less red meat, we'll get less storms and bad weather. I know we laugh at this stuff because that is the policies of net zero. Under net zero, we've got to get our, they say that the cows fart and they fart out methane and burp out methane, and methane is a greenhouse gas which gets considered in all these things, and we've got to get that to net zero. So that's the policies. It's not just like Matt Green, so this is some advice. This is the policies the government will put in place. They have to put down the track to force this off. They've got to make the price of steak at the supermarket dearer, so the average Australian can't afford to buy it, to meet what we signed up to under these net zero and these Paris commitments. Look, Australia's got to wake up how destructive this policy is. If you want a future where your kids and grandkids won't know what it's like to eat a steak or won't know what it's like to drink a milkshake or enjoy a piece of cheese, that is what you've signed up to under these net zero policies. And yet we see China steamrolling ahead, 400 gigawatts of coal-fired power stations under construction, 20 times what we are planning to close down. And even if these zealots are right that it stops bad weather, nothing Australia can do will make any difference whatsoever.
Correct. We're just self-saboteurs. Now, there was a disinformation powwow over the weekend, I read. Australia's e-safety czar, Julie Inman-Grant, caught up with the former director of the Disinformation Governance Board, Nina Jankovic, in Canberra. Hosted by the Australian government, of course, they discussed the impacts of misinformation on social media platforms. Here's Nina loving what Julie's doing.
I actually really admire the eSafety Act, the Online Safety Act that governs the work that the Safety Commissioner does. I think it really balances freedom of expression with safety in a very unique way.
Oh, Katherine, these two are dangerous together, aren't they?
Well, who the hell are these women? These American women, well, I don't know, people who identify as women, I beg your pardon, but, they've come over here from America, sitting here telling us Australians what content we can and cannot see. They're rather attractive. They're very articulate. Our government's brought them over here. I'm really hoping that the taxpayers didn't pay for that nice little junket for Nina. But obviously she had her job in the Biden administration, and that organisation, the Governor's Board, was shut down because of, she said it was, right-wing bigots having a go at her. But in effect, whenever I hear the words disinformation, misinformation, I just think censor.
Yeah.
You are a censor, and you want to censor what we think, what we say, and I just think, who gave the mandate for this, and who the hell are you, and where's your authority? And you've got a couple of books out, Nina, so obviously you're wanting to promote those. But I agree with you. These women are very dangerous, and they have no business meddling in the freedom of speech of the Australian people. She can go back to America and go meddle there, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, very true. Just a quick one from you, Craig Kelly, about a story that made headlines last week. Bill Shorten bowing out. What do you make of his timing?
Well, Chris, a couple of things on this. Firstly, he's getting over $1 million in his new salary, as was the Vice-Chancellor of Canberra University, which receives over $100 million from taxpayers.
Wow. So
I just have some objection of politicians going into these organisations that are funded by taxpayers. And look, you can't justify that $1 million salary for that job under any circumstances. Also, the point I make, he hasn't gone yet. He is still sitting in federal cabinet making decisions that affect everyone. Now, his vested financial interests are not at getting re-elected, but supporting his new organisation. Now, we've got policies in Australia that need to be discussed today about how many overseas students we're allowing into the country. Now, if you're a vice-chancellor of a university, you want as many students coming in as you possibly can. And who's he actually representing when he's sitting in cabinet shadow? So not shadow cabinet, the actual cabinet today. If he's going to resign, he should go now. He should get out of cabinet. Okay, maybe he wants to sit on the back bench until the next election. Maybe that's not so objectionable, but he should not be sitting in cabinet there, for the next 6 months into the election. And just one other point, Chris, he should not be able to retain his government-funded parliamentary pension of probably roughly around $200,000 a year. That is double dipping. Remember, everyone elected after 2004 gets no pension. Because he was elected before that date, he's on the old parliamentary system. And the old parliamentary system didn't make any accountants for this double dipping. And that's the problem. You can't go and say, I need a parliamentary pension, I want $200,000 a year, at the same time as you're picking up $1 million in a taxpayer-funded job. It is completely wrong, and everyone running around in Parliament saying, "Oh yeah, Bill Shorten, good luck to you, mate." No, I think this is to be called out that he should basically forfeit his parliamentary pension if he's going to take one of these lucrative taxpayer jobs.